Chanca writes, he did not get up and show deep emotion, to the point of tears for the Christian's death, and began talking about that, saying as best he could that a few had died of illness and others had gone into Caunabo's territory to find the gold mine in the city and were killed there, while the rest had been seized and killed in their own camp. Guacanagari then presented Colón with several gifts, including a crown made of solid gold. El Doctor Chanca went to examine Guacanagari, but he said he was faking it. He wasn't injured. He encouraged Colón to punish him because it was obvious that it was Guacanagari who had destroyed La Navidad. Hearing that his ally, Guacanagari, had been attacked and was hurt, Colón asked him to come meet him at his ship. He wanted to talk to him. And even though it was very clear that Guacanagari had pretended to be injured, Colón was won over by Guacanagari's tale. They restored their friendship and continued to be allies. After Guacanagari was examined by Chanca, the physician, Guacanagari was brought onto the ship and he was treated like royalty. He was given cakes and sweets, and he is the first documented cacique to actually see horses. It is said that he was both terrified, surprised, intrigued by these animals on board of Colón's ship. This here depicts how they transported the animals in the belly of the ship. While still on the boat, Colón used El Indio Diego Colón as an interpreter to have Guacanagari understand that he needed to establish a second settlement. Unknowingly, Guacanagari actually gave really important intel to Colón. And Colón started to learn about the different tribes and the different political alliances on the island. He would later use this information to put the indigenous populations against each other. He then allowed Guacanagari to return to his yucayeque. Colón would later regret letting the cacique go. Guacanagari's brother then showed up the next morning with women from Borinquen. And this is a controversial anecdote or part of the story. A lot of people feel that this was just added to give the indigenous people a bad look, a bad reputation. However, we do know that this was a strategy used by the indigenous people. So he then proceeded to basically violate the women. Guacanagari's brother, not the Spanish. And it's said that he took his time with these women, and the desired effect was to kind of distract the Spanish while Guacanagari made his escape. Because for some reason not described, Guacanagari became fearful of Colón. It was probably his gut feeling said, hey, let's get out of here. It is then believed that these men basically took turns and spent the whole evening with these women. At some point, they all fell asleep. The indigenous girls actually leapt from the boat. So they jumped off the boat into the water. And since the Spanish and the indigenous men that had brought them to the boat were all sleeping, by the time the men woke up, the girls they were long gone. Pedro Martí de Angleria actually records this incident and says they had covered such a long distance that our boats were not able to recapture but 4 of them when they were getting out of the water. Pedro Martí de Angleria says that Catalina, who seemed to have been the principal of this group of women, relying on the strength of her arms, swam about 3 miles in not so very calm a sea. Indeed, that was the distance of the ship from the shore. The Spanish then took a smaller boat and were able to capture 3 more of the women, but not Catalina. They believe that she actually ran after Guacanagari. They then went in search of Guacanagari and the women, and they found that he had escaped with all of his possessions. They searched all of the countryside that was nearby the shore, trying to find Guacanagari, and they captured several indigenous people and tried to get them to say where he was. But they all said the same thing. We don't know. we haven't seen him. Colon then decided to get back onto his boat with all of his men and continue along the shoreline. They ended up near what is today La Isabela. And it was in that spot where Colon established his second settlement in the Western Hemisphere.